Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about the Eternals movie that came out about 2 weeks ago now. And yeah, let's jump right into it. I will say overall, I think that this film would probably be somewhere within the mid to lower mid range of all the Marvel films that exist out there. Although it could definitely fall further down the list if I really thought about it. Off the top of my head, that's where I'm placing it right now. I haven't tried to compare it to specific films in my mind, but there are definitely a couple that stick out that I know are worse than this. That's all I'll say on that. I will say that overall, this movie was just a 2.5 hour chunk of time that, it happened. It didn't need to happen, and it wouldn't have impacted me if it didn't happen. Unfortunately, that is my thought process on this as of now. It's not like I needed to see this film. It's not like there's anything that comes out of the film that I'm particularly excited about, and I will explain why. The main thing here is that the film did not give us a reason to want to stick around for further installations of both this specific group of characters and also into the MCU in general. I mean, the TV shows have done a wonderful job at setting up for potential future events that we already know is coming to fruition in the future of the MCU. But this film didn't do anything like that. It didn't give us characters that were particularly relatable or interesting or characters that we really wanted to see succeed because, well, most of the characters have backstories that are barely touched upon, or their characterizations are very bland, and it's very clear that they, for the most part, are just saving the world for the hell of it. I mean, they have no real reason or inclination as to why they would want to save the Earth. I mean, it just seems like, something that'd be cool to do as opposed to something that they really want to do. And that being said, like the few characters that supposedly would really like the planet to survive, they are either not compelling in their characterization or they leave at the end. I mean, specifically, I'm talking about, I believe it's Kingo, right? Kingo is the Eternal that is an actor, and he's fully integrated into the society of India, right? He's a Bollywood actor. He's been living there for probably about a century, maybe more at this point, and yet he doesn't even bother to be a part of the final fight because he basically says it'll be too much of a hassle to try and go up against the most powerful Eternal among all of them. On the other hand, you have Cersei, who seemingly cares a lot about human society or humanity in general, but we don't get to see really why. I don't know, it just doesn't feel like there's a emotional connection in her existence that relates to the rest of humanity. I mean, she has a boyfriend, but beyond that, she doesn't have anyone else really that's human around her. And on top of that, her relationship is only present for like 10 minutes of the beginning of the film and like 3 minutes at the end. So it's really unbelievable for the most part. And then on top of that, the last person that you could really say is clearly, part of human society to the extent that, they probably don't want everything to be destroyed, is Druig. It's not even Fastos, because Fastos is basically like, I don't really mind if the world gets destroyed. At least I have like these two people and we'll all die together or whatever. I don't know. And Druig, his whole deal, like he has the most emotional component to me in that he is so torn for centuries or I think thousands of years or something like that, that he can stop all of human conflict, and he is not allowed to. And in the end, that's what causes him to leave the Eternals. And on top of that, he's still protecting at least a small community of people to try and give them the best life possible, so to speak. I mean, sure, he takes away their autonomy on some level, but in his mind, I mean, as someone who is capable of stopping all human conflicts, he's trying to balance between actually controlling them and letting them live their lives as best he can. And so out of everyone, right? The people that clearly, in terms of the way that their interpersonal relationships are portrayed, actually care about humanity would be Druig as well as Kingo. And at the same time, we're supposed to believe that Cersei cares when she doesn't really show a reason to, or a emotional tie anywhere near the level of what Kingo shares with, I believe the character is Karun. And then on top of that with Druig and his people. I mean, we don't even see Druig's community for that long, and it's very clear that he does care about them because he lets them live and survive, right? By trying to get them to run away. I mean, they needed to tie these characters more towards humanity, and they just don't do that. And that is one of the biggest things that falls short with this film. We don't care about the Eternals because they don't seem human for the most part. I mean, I feel bad for Karun, right? Because at the end, I mean, he just goes back home and waits for the world to end. I feel bad for him. I mean, we know all the Eternals will likely survive the emergence, right? And just be moving on. So there's no real consequence if they fail. And also, we know that the world's not going to be destroyed because who are these characters? I mean, like, to be quite frank, if the world was not going to be destroyed by Thanos, it's not going to be destroyed in the Eternals film. There's no tension in the film because you know that the world's not going to end. And I only realized this, like, I wasn't particularly excited at the end, right, of the film. I still enjoyed it, but then I've watched some other people's thoughts on the film as well, and I was wondering, like, well, you know, I knew something was missing, and I'm blanking on who the reviewer was that mentioned this, but she had said that in the end of the film, right, there's no tension because the world's not going to be destroyed, and you know it's not going to be destroyed. It's just not going to happen. I mean, you could say whether or not you liked Black Widow. I mean, it's solely possible that her family could have been killed in that film. We already know that she wasn't going to, so that undercut it still. But that was an element there. I mean, people around her could still die. In Iron Man 1, 2, and 3, you didn't know if Tony Stark was going to survive, really. In most of the films that we see, we don't know that everything's going to work out in the end. I mean, typically it does, but, you know, you could have characters die, and here it's like, they're not going to die. And yes, a couple of them do. I think 2 Eternals die, but even then it's like, okay, whatever. They've lived for like a couple thousand years. It's not a big deal that they're dead. That's just how I'm feeling after watching this film, after sitting with it for a week. It does not have proper stakes. Now let's cut into something that I, for the most part, enjoyed, and that is the presence of the Celestials in this film. It does posit a few questions in my mind, specifically about Ego, because I was thinking about this earlier, and I believe Ego is a Celestial. Peter Quill is half Celestial, right? So why doesn't Ego look like the rest of the Celestials? Is there a reason for that? And also, why doesn't Ego go around, you know, exploding the universe and creating stars? Like, why didn't he go around doing that? What happened there? I personally have no idea. And also, do the other Celestials have similar abilities to Ego? Are they tied to a planet? Because clearly they shouldn't be, because they emerge from a planet. It wouldn't make sense for them to be tied to another thing, if that makes sense. So I'm very curious as to why there's that very big difference between how the Celestial that we've seen previously and the Celestials that we're seeing now, why they're so different. That being said, Arishem did look very cool. It was nice to see a difference in scale, in that Arishem was like huge, right? He was planet-sized, basically, maybe a little bit bigger, I don't know. He was large enough that the Eternals fit in his hand, right? And on the other hand, like, the other Eternal would emerge from the ground on the planet from the Celestial Seed, and he was big enough to destroy the planet that he's emerging from, right? So that was all pretty cool. It was interesting. And the idea of the Celestial Seed, I think that's a pretty cool idea, a cool concept, but it also undercuts the other antagonists throughout the film, so we'll talk about that in a second as well. Now, the last thing I do want to talk about here is the Celestials created the Eternals and the Deviants. And this is something that I know this is something from the comic books, but it's also been slightly altered here in that I believe the Celestials created the Eternals and the Deviants specifically from humanity. I could be wrong about that, but that was my understanding of it. I never read the comic books when the Eternals were actually introduced. All I remember is some videos that Comics Explained created way back when I watched a ton of his videos back in maybe high school, early high school, stuff like that. The change that they made here posits more questions than anything else. And that is the Deviants, they're created, right? They're biological creatures and they exist, whatever. They became predators, right? And as a result, there needed to be the creation of the Eternals so that they could combat against the Deviants. Now, I don't know if that's different. What I do know that is seemingly different from what I remember or what I understand is that the Celestials, or the Eternals rather, they're not biologically created. They're not developed from humanity. They're robots. This causes so many questions and concerns for me because how does Eros exist then? How does Thanos exist? What is Titan? How is Thanos a Celestial if he is a robot as well? If Thanos is a robot, what the heck? What the actual heck? How does... what? I'm sorry, I'm just confused. Because Thanos is an Eternal with a deviant gene, right? That's why he looks disfigured, right? He has a similar physical feature to what a deviant would look like, despite having the physical prowess, the longevity, all those different attributes that are known for Eternals. Both his parents were Eternals, and yet he looks physically like a deviant. At least on his his face, right? His face, the color of his skin, stuff like that, that looks more like what a deviant would look like. Now, that doesn't match up with the deviants that we see in the film because they look completely different from what Thanos looks like. But, that was the idea. That's the idea that I had. They just weren't addressing that Titan was filled with Eternals that were altered from humanity, and yet, technically, Thanos genetically is similar to humanity because that's how he was pulled out of existence, right? And that's how the Eternals were developed, right? They came from humanity. That's not the case here. They're robots. They can't have children. So how the heck is Firefox, or I think that's his name, but how the heck is Eros and Thanos? How are they brothers, first off? And how do they have parents? It baffles my mind right now, and I need a proper explanation for this because this film was not fun. It wasn't great, okay? It was enjoyable enough, and then I started thinking about it, and it's just causing more and more questions for me, and less of a reason for me to want to watch a future film with these characters. I mean, as of now, I could never watch the Eternals 2 if that ever happens or whatever, and I would be fine because nothing really interesting happened here. Alright, let's talk about the Eternals specifically, and first off, the biggest issue here is that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Eternals. 10 characters that we know nothing about. There are no existing characters that are used in this film as well, so we are running blind with a bunch of new characters that we need to develop an interest for. It's not gonna happen. I mean, you're not gonna get people interested in 10 new characters within the MCU if you're not even gonna tie it in really to the MCU at all. There's no reason for this film to take place in the MCU at this moment. It could have just existed on a planet there, and you could have been like, oh yeah, these creatures have been here for centuries. They're what humanity developed into the legends of gods, right? And it wouldn't have made a difference. You could have just made this with any other studio. And beyond the fact that the Eternals were a Marvel property, no one would care and no one would know. And that is one of the big issues with this film. But beyond that, with the actual characters, let's jump into it. First, let's talk about Icarus. Now, I don't know what Icarus's abilities are in the comics. Never heard of his character. I know the story of Icarus from Greek mythology. Apparently that was just a throwaway line from Sprite, a story that she made, whatever. Icarus's character, I don't know why he loves Cersei. There's no indication of them really falling in love beyond him saying that he likes her, especially with a story that takes place over, I believe, thousands of years, right? They should show some progression of their relationship. It doesn't happen. All they do is have Icarus walk up, be like, yo, I like you, let's get married. They have some awkward intercourse on a rock or whatever, and then they get married. Like, why? And this also is related to the problems with the general layout of the film. I mean, it jumps from present day to past to present day to past, and it just destroys the pacing for the film because it's unintelligent, honestly. The entire layout for the film, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, but with Icarus's final moments, I mean, he just lets everything happen after being basically the antagonist for the third act, just because they need someone to fight at the end, and then he just commits suicide by flying into the sun? I get it, he's Icarus. He died because he flew too close to the sun, but why? There's no point. There's no point. If he flew out into space and just disappeared, and this is part of the reason why this movie is so frustrating. It'd be like, all right, fine, the fake Superman copy that has no real proper emotions throughout the entirety of this film is just going to appear later on down the line, and maybe they'll actually flesh out his character a little bit more beyond being Cersei's boyfriend for some unknown reason that, you know, is just basically a good robot for the Celestials. I mean, what was the point of him killing himself? It didn't make sense. It didn't add anything to the character. It wasn't like he redeemed himself in the end. He didn't do anything proper there. So it's like, he's dead. They had nothing else to do with him, so he died. Let's talk about Sprite. Sprite just exists, and I say that in the most unfortunate manner, because she could have had such an interesting role here. But when I walked into the film, in my brain, I was like, she is dying because she's a child. And they can't just have her be a child forever because the actress is going to grow up. So this character is going to die, or something's going to happen with this character. I suspected she would die. Randomly, they bring up that she is in love with Icarus. Okay, wonderful. It doesn't feel that way at all the entire time. The entire time that Cersei, Icarus, and Sprite are traveling around, you don't really feel like she cares all that much about Icarus at all. And so all we get is Kingo being like, I know you're in love with him. And that's it. We're just supposed to believe it right there. They're in love. That moment only exists to explain why Sprite joins up with Icarus afterwards. There's no other reason for that. And it's stupid. Okay. It's just stupid. Beyond that, no one cares. Literally no one cares that this person betrays everyone alongside Icarus because she loves him or whatever, and then in the end, all is just forgiven, and, you know, everyone's just gonna go on with their day, and that's that. All right, whatever. Oh, and now she's a child, like a normal child. Cool. That answers that question. I don't need to see her in the future installments of this film because she's just a normal human person and she's not going to add anything to it. Honestly, like, no. I understand that this video is getting pretty long, but there is so much to say. And I understand that, maybe no one's going to continue watching because it's been 20 minutes. But that's okay. I just need to get my thoughts out on this because, wow, this is sad. Let's keep going. All right. I'm not going to talk more about Cersei because I already mentioned, she doesn't really have much going for her as a character. She's thrown into the leadership position. For some reason, she cares about humanity, even though it's not really shown all that much. Specifically because they don't bring Dane Whitman along for the ride. If they brought Dane along for the ride, it would make much more sense because we could see that relationship. We could see that she actually cares about at least one person, right? There's someone that she cares about. At the very least, that's why she's going to continue on this journey, trying to protect humanity, right? They don't show that. They don't show that she really cares beyond, a sense of duty or whatever to the human race. Thena is the most underutilized character in this entire film. You bring in Angelina Jolie, and you don't give her enough. Thena was probably one of, if not the most interesting Eternal that they developed. And her relationship with Gilgamesh could have been absolutely phenomenal. Honestly, the two of them could have been the main characters of this film, and it would have been so fascinating because you could have just seen her go more and more mad, or at least have, spurts of madness, have her relationship with Gilgamesh, and that could have been a story on its own. But unfortunately, like every other character, you just kind of have to throw them in there to the pot to have an Avengers-style battle at the end. You bring in such a top-tier actress, and you don't let them shine. Everything with that character, fascinating, awesome, loved it. You needed, you could have had 30 more minutes of this character, half to the cast, and it would have been fascinating. But you didn't do that. You gave us too many characters. Ajax didn't need to exist. There's no point in Ajax's character. Ajax, I believe, is the former leader of this team. She didn't need to be in this film. Either she needed to be flushed out, in which case the film could have just taken place in the past. Didn't need anything from modern day at all until the post-credits scene where you see Cersei and Dane Whitman hanging out, right? That's all you needed there. Or cut her out entirely and just have the modern day team. You don't really need Ajax at all because you don't understand her at all. She has no motivations, no real qualities to her beyond she's the leader of the team because she's the leader of the team. Pointless character. Absolutely pointless. No personality or no fleshing out of this characterization. No reason for them to be in the film. Kingo. I already mentioned Kingo earlier, so I'm not going to say too much here. Loved Kingo's character. Loved his relationship with Karun. Easily one of the best parts of the film, if not the best part of the film. Their relationship, beyond Gilgamesh and Thena, right? Those are the two key groups of people that were really the best parts of the film. The comedic relief that those two characters brought was awesome. Loved it so much. Honestly, another pair that could have been having a lot more screen time in this movie. Phastos, wasted potential completely. They didn't show his arc at all. They tell us, Phastos loved the idea of helping people, helping them improve technology, moving humanity forward, more than just, preventing the deviants from destroying them all. Actually helping and taking part in human affairs. His involvement in humanity results in the atom bomb. And yet, he, up until that point, is not involved with any characters within the MCU. You could have had him in a meeting with Howard Stark. You could have had him meet any prior technologist. It could have been Zola. It could have been literally anyone. Even Hank Pym, right? There are several candidates that you could have said he just had a few meetings with them, right? Or he met them at some point. Just having one scene to tie them into the MCU, because this film has nothing to do with the MCU at all. And then the atom bomb happens, and we're told for no reason that he has something to do with the atom bomb. Immediately, he says, I want nothing more to do with humanity. That entire scene, Pointless. Absolutely pointless, because right after we see him with a family. What's the point? What is the point? Were they supposed, like, it's like they wanted to show his arc without actually showing us his arc. They wanted to tell us that the arc happened. I mean, it's like me saying, don't watch any of the Infinity Saga. This is Iron Man, or this is Tony Stark. He is a weapons manufacturer. In between, he finds out that his weapons are being used to kill innocent people. Oh, and here he's dying to save all of humanity. That's the story here with Phastos. They do the exact same thing. They just don't show any of it. It's pointless. Did not need to be in the movie at all. Druig. One of the most interesting individual characters. I think that Druig, along with Thena, the most interesting characters, hands down. Thena with her mental illness being caused by Mad Weary or whatever, and Druig because he has the ability to save the entire planet, you know, albeit by enslaving them. And that is a very clear emotional piece of turmoil that he has to come to terms with, because he can't just let humanity be controlled by him. They won't have any autonomy. They won't be human anymore. And that is such a compelling idea that they could run with and show, but they don't. Gilgamesh. I wanted more of Gilgamesh. They made a decent character, you know. I wanted to see his relationship with Thena a lot more. They built something there, and it was like, okay, let's take a sneak peek at what these two characters are actually like together. And then they kill him off. I mean, of the deaths, he's the death that, like, was actually important, I guess. So, I mean, I guess they needed a character that was, you know, decent, that they needed to kill off, as opposed to Icarus and Ajax, right? So that's why that happened. But, I mean, it would have been much more interesting for the two of them to still be alive and have an actual relationship that we get to see a lot more of. Because it was really cool to see what we did see with the two of them. Honestly, like, we needed more of Gilgamesh as well in this film. And finally, we have Makkari. She exists. There's nothing more to say about this character. Like, literally nothing. She has super speed. She exists. The Deviants, pointless. No reason for them to exist at all in this film. They were literally just there to get people to come to see the film. They were not the main villains of the film at all. I mean, he just gets sliced up by Thena. It's pretty simple. No point in the Deviants in this film. Dane Whitman. Dane Whitman, no point of him in this film either. Literally no purpose behind his character. I thought he was going to be the character that was, you know, human, that was going to join us along this ride and kind of be like us, our ride to see what the Celestials and the Eternals and the Deviants, what everything had in store. And, you know, ask the questions that we would want to ask, stuff like that. Because a lot of films have those types of characters. That's how you get the viewers invested. He's not in this film. There's no purpose behind him in this film. I mean, apart from introducing him. They introduce him, and it's simply just so we could see him with his sword at the end as, you know, he's going to be Black Knight later on. And they don't explain his family history. They don't explain anything with the character. And it's a missed opportunity there. Because they had Kit Harington. I mean, this character's going to be awesome. I know he's going to be awesome. Because it's Kit Harington. And on top of that, he's playing an interesting character. I mean, this is not a big character. I don't know much about him beyond the abilities that the sword has, right? And the curse of the sword. I mean, and it's not part of the film at all. So he was not needed in this film. They could have introduced him later on down the line, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do in Blade, or if he's going to be a part of Blade, because Blade talks to him at the end, and that's all that there is to it. There's nothing more beyond that that's really important to mention here. They have so much star potential in this film, and they just don't use some of the best actors, or some of the characters that I wanted to see the most from. It's ridiculous. Alright, so that's all I really have to say for this video. I mentioned everything. It's been about 30 minutes. I'm sorry for taking up too much of your time, but I just had to get this much off my chest because it's too much. It's been too much. Too much clouding my brain about this film, and, you know, what a waste it was, honestly. I didn't think this film, or this video, was going to be as negative as it is, but, you know, here we are. That's all I had to say for this video. If you enjoyed the Eternals, please let me know in the comments below. Perhaps I'm being too harsh on it, but honestly, it wasn't great. And I still think that it's a mid-tier film, but in terms of where it's located in the MCU at large, it is a failure. Because we are at a turning point within the MCU where we need more groups and more characters to latch onto. We need a reason to move forward and want to see more MCU films. And when all the TV shows are doing a much better job, it's a problem. So yeah, that's all I have to say for this video. Again, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did you like the video? Do you have anything else you want me to talk about in the future? And as always, like if you like the video, subscribe for more videos from me. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.